welcome back to Pop Culture with Pat. So I am so excited to be joined by my special guest today. Today I'm talking to Chad Galster, editor of Special Ops Lioness. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Chad.
Well, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Of course. So first off, I want to start off just by saying, hey, congratulations on the series. I was able to watch the whole thing, and I absolutely loved it. So congratulations on just
Thank
having
you.
the whole
I'm
thing.
glad to hear that. We're really proud of how this one turned out. It's interesting. It's kind of different than your average military drama. We've got some different things to offer. So I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I hope everyone else enjoyed it too. It's really fun to work on.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. And yeah, I mean, you said there's so many of these kind of shows, but this one for me, it definitely, stood out from some of those. So the way that you guys approached it. So as far as I'm curious, so for you, Chad, because you've been working with Taylor Sheridan now for years now on different
Yeah.
projects. When he's working on a new project, how does it all kind of come about? Does he just like when he's working on a new project, does he approach you and say, hey, I got this new project. Is this something that you'd be interested in working on, or how does that all get started?
Well, it's all just kind of on a continuum. When he's working on something new, the first thing that happens is usually I get to read it. So I got the scripts for Lioness quite a while ago and read them and really enjoyed them. He has so many things going at the same time that it's just a question of availability. So for me, I was finishing, what was I doing? 1923. And then they had started production on Lioness, and so they had actually shot a good chunk of Lioness before I came on board. But it's just rolling from one thing to the next. So whenever I'm available and whenever he has something new, I jump on it. So there isn't a lot of it's unspoken with he and I at this point. It's just kind of assumed that I'll be able to jump onto it, and so yeah. The thrill of working for him is that there's always something different happening. We have our Yellowstone universe, and then we have something like Lioness. We have a few shows coming up next year that are outside of the Yellowstone universe as well. So there's always something interesting to do, and I'm always game for whatever he has on
Oh
deck.
yeah, for sure. I mean, the guy is a machine. I mean, the whole everyone that works on these projects just constantly cranking out stuff, and they're all great. So, what was it like when you, I guess, when you initially read through Lioness? What was it about this project that really attracted you to it?
Well, the love story with Aaliyah and Cruz is really unique, and it's interesting. I say love story, but it's really about Cruz's character trying to find some sort of connection to anybody. So, is she gay? Is she not? She probably doesn't know. I don't think that we ever decided, but she was just trying to find a connection in anyone. She was a woman who had lost her family early on, or family's dead or in prison, and was just looking for someone to connect to. And so that story was interesting to me, and that in the course of her work and this incredibly important mission that she's on, she would have strong feelings for this woman that she's supposed to use really to get to her father and to kill him. Was interesting, and it was something that I hadn't seen before. And then, of course, this idea of infiltrating terrorist networks through the wives and girlfriends of the terrorists themselves was a unique idea, and had a basis in reality. And so, when you tell people like the sort of log line of this show, by and large, people are like, oh, that's interesting. I haven't really heard that before. And Taylor has a knack for that. He'll write a show about something that we all have a general knowledge of, but he'll find an in that is unique, that is a way that we haven't seen before. And so for Lioness, that those two things to me were the most interesting aspects of it, and I think those were both paid off really well. If you're someone who watched from beginning to end, I think there's some really nice payoffs throughout the show.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, I love the story arc for Cruz, and then you're not really expecting starting out the show. You don't think that she's going on this mission to infiltrate this group and take down this leader. You're not expecting her to kind of fall in love with this character.
No, there's like at the end of episode 5 when they're on that little FaceTime chat, there's these little hints of like, oh, that seems there's some wait, is there did I just see? Yeah, like there are these little hints of it when they're talking when Ollie is on the beach. So yeah, it wasn't like that's the primary focus of the story either. It was just one of the elements of the story, one of the things that made it unique. But also, the idea that affection for your target might come into conflict, for an operative was something interesting. So it's a bit of a slow burn. It's not like the whole series doesn't hang on that, but it's just one of the really interesting, unique elements when you know, in the world of military dramas. It just felt like that was something that was kind of unique for us and felt very earned through the writing and through the performances of those wonderful women who, you know, very talented actresses who portrayed those characters.
Oh yeah, the performances in this show, it's like, man, there are certain scenes, and we'll get into some of them in like a specific episode in a little bit. But yeah, phenomenal acting all around. So for you, Chad, when you start your process out, when you first join a series, what does that kind of look for you, and has that changed for you over the years? I imagine it probably has if you as you've done different projects, but what does that kind of look like?
It depends. Sometimes I'm in on the ground level. Sometimes I'm the first person that gets the dailies and cuts the scenes and cuts the shows. At other times, just because of the role that I've assumed with Taylor over the years and the, you know, close way that we work together, sometimes it will be, you know, where some other folks have done, you know, first passes of things, and then I'll come into it a little bit later and work with him and make his cut. You know, the cut that we ended up airing. So it just depends on the show. It depends on how many things we have going on. You know, we often have 2 or 3 shows happening concurrently, and it just depends on you know, on how that all falls into place. For Lioness, like I said, a lot of it had been shot, and there had been some cuts of things, and then you know, I worked closely with him to make the broadcast versions of a number of, I think out of the 8 episodes, I did 5 of them, I believe. So I came in a little bit later on this one, but I had seen it early on. I had seen a lot of the footage early on, and I had read the scripts early on. So I had the story in my head. And then just when I saw it, you know, and understanding what, you know, what Taylor's sensibilities are, it becomes a pretty, you know, short path to finding a cut that he's interested in, and then um, you know, we just kind of hammer it out from there, and we move fast, and we you know, we'll take breaks and get a show together, and then go on to another episode, and then look back like, hey, this other one, do we like that? Yes, okay, cool, move on. There isn't a lot of time for second guessing, I suppose. We move very, very quickly in our world.
On to the next one. Yeah. So Linus, we kind of mentioned it's a different world than some of the other projects. Obviously, 1883, Yellowstone. How did you familiarize yourself? I don't know if you were already kind of familiar with this world, but how did you familiarize yourself with the world of CIA and special ops?
You know, in working with him, it's interesting, like all these very different genres that we tackle, from, you know, the old west to modern day military. The consistency through all of them is that they're just stories about characters. They're stories about mothers and fathers and children and people falling in love and dying and all this. So thematically, something like Lioness isn't like all that far removed from a show like 1883 to me. They're still about parents and you know, Joe, the Zoe Saldana character, trying to deal with her home life and this very important job that she has. So I, long story short, look, I've seen, you know, I love espionage movies. I love spy movies. I've seen a lot of those films. It's not that we sit necessarily and do a lot of research ahead of time, you know, on how, you know, how previous films and previous series dictate how we might put something like Lioness together. We just we cut the stories as they come and as they're presented to us, and so the footage and the performances dictate to me how it goes together as much as anything that might have, you know, that I might have seen before. So you know, long story short, there isn't really any special preparation that goes into it. I think he does a ton of it when he's writing and researching and all of that. And then, you know, it's incumbent of myself and the other editors that we have just to make sure that we're doing justice to the material, the performances, and making sure that we showcase thematically everything that's happening. But it doesn't, you know, in my mind, in my experience with him, it doesn't require any sort of special preparation. It just requires being in tune to what the purpose of each scene is, and what the purpose of each performance is, and what the intent of, you know, all these wonderful actors that we have, and making sure that you honor that. So it's focusing inward on the material that we are presented instead of necessarily doing a lot of research outside of that.
When
That's
you
been
say
my
though that
that's how it's
Taylor,
worked for me.
when you say Taylor does a lot of prep for it, I don't felt that because I know I was talking to Kimberly Adams, who did like costume design, and was just talking about how a show like this where you have people that might be, kind of in like, the army and the Marines or things like that, watching these shows, they can be watching this and pick up on little things, and they're like, that's not really how this necessarily happens like in real life, and that can very easily take someone out of a show for watching something like that. So I'm sure he puts a lot of research and before he writes a lot of these characters and stuff like that.
A ton. I mean, a ton. First of all, he's just interested in that world, and so he does a lot of reading. He's done a lot of reading, but also he has a lot of friends and colleagues in the special forces communities. We have really excellent military advisors. Brandon Muirbrook is one of them, who is a Green Beret, who I've become close to just because he's in our orbit and is an advisor on a lot of these shows. But we make sure that to the extent that we are able, we get those details right, because it is important. And even thinking about things like Yellowstone and some of the horse shows that we do, even if you don't necessarily know that you're seeing something that's right or wrong, if you're like someone like a layperson who's just like, okay, these are horses and all that, there's a sense, I believe, from the attention to detail that we give, that you believe you're seeing something authentic, that it comes across even if you can't tell exactly why. And so we very much make that a focal point of all of the shows we do, and Lioness was certainly no exception. So there's a lot of attention to detail in the weapons that were used, like when you're in the sounds that we use, if the sounds of the gunfire, we make sure that like it's that weapon that we have on screen. We don't leave a lot to chance. Every once in a while you have to take artistic license, and it's still a TV show, but we do our best to make sure that the attention to detail is there, and that the things that we're portraying are accurate from a technical standpoint.
Yeah, no, as close as you can get, and those little details, they really matter.
Yeah.
So you got multiple storylines going on in the series. You got Cruz and her journey. You also have Joe trying to balance her home life and work life. A number of big action sequences involving the Lioness team. What were some of your biggest challenges as far as editing wise, just in the series?
That big raid at the end in episode 8 was, I don't know, challenge. It was really fun, like when you have like bits of action happening over different locations and you're trying to track what's happening. It's really exciting to put something like that together. This big island's big set piece. It's a real place, by the way, with that name, Fortaleza, which is in Spain, I believe. But anyway, it's an actual location that we shot at, and so you're trying to honor like the when you're trying to honor like the time order of things, and create a ticking clock of like how much time is left, and making sure that what you're showing seems plausible but like fits in and like still shows all the story that you're trying to show. I don't know, the action sequences to me are the most fun. They are when you watch them, hopefully you just feel that it's one big long ride. When you put them together, they're shot over a period of weeks. So the challenge is to make sure that you create a momentum that is carried through, from one day shooting to the next. I've been doing it long enough to where I don't, it's more of an enjoyment than a challenge, really. You say like, what's the hardest part? Like, I don't know, it's all sort of hard, but it's all, it's varying degrees of fun to me at this point, like putting together big action sequences like that. And some of the most difficult scenes are really like some of the intimate, close character moments. Making sure that we got the stuff with Cruz and Aaliyah right. When two people are figuring out if they're in love or attracted to each other, and all those little moments, because those are things that we have all experienced in some degree. So when you're showing the audience something that they themselves have a firsthand experience of, that's sometimes the most delicate, and that sometimes you have to be the most careful, because you want those things to feel true to our communal experience as people. Action sequences, most of us have not been in a gunfight, car chase, and so you have some freedom there to show people, well, this is what it's like, and they don't really have a frame of reference for it. But the intimate character stuff is where often, the husband and wife stuff, like if you're a married person, you just had a fight with your spouse about being around for your kids, like, well, a lot of us have had those fights. It's just a normal part of being in a relationship, and so you want to try to make sure that feels authentic.
Yeah, like we kind of talked about a little bit ago, just talking about capturing those little subtleties, especially with Cruz and Aaliyah, where you first kind of see those moments where they're kind of hinted at that there might be something a little bit more there than
Right.
what we initially thought, like going into it.
Right.
Do you have any scenes as far as that, that you found maybe more challenging than others, that you were really at once they were done, that you were really proud of how they came out? Like, I imagine obviously you're proud of the whole series, but were any scenes that really stuck out for you?
The very beginning of the series, that first raid on the compound, there's a lot of stuff happening there. Like episode 1, very beginning. when we see the first Lioness, the one who dies in the missile strike. And we see Joe and we see her team, and we're trying to figure out what's happening. That was cool to put together. It's also very tense. You're trying to like build this tension and be tightening the screws the entire time. And it's a good 6 or 7 minutes, I believe, the final thing. So when you're starting a brand new series, you have to tell the audience what they're in for. And what we've told them that they're in for is something like tension, excitement, sadness, and a lot of gun battles and things like that. So you want to make sure that you're selling what you say you're selling, I guess is a way to put it. Like, you see the previews and the trailers, like, okay, it's going to be some big action show, and you sit down, you watch episode 1, and we're like, yes, that's exactly what it is. Here's why, and here's how we're going to do it. Here's how we're going to execute it. And then that moment when the strike happens, and then Joe just takes off her vest and is just like just exhausted and sad, and everything, every emotion that she's feeling, that goes into the opening titles of the show. I was very proud of how that came together. And it's important to set the tone of your series appropriately, and I think that sequence does.
Oh yeah, for sure. And yeah, no, that sequence came out, fantastic. You guys definitely hit the ground running as far as, the opening of the series, and kind of
Yeah.
laid that groundwork, like you said, as to what to expect for the rest of the series.
That he'll start off usually with a big action set piece, or in 1923 it's Helen Mirren shooting a guy, and I don't know, there's always something exciting happening up front. And it's really about setting the audience's expectation of what they are in for, and saying, if you want to come along for this ride, this is what we're going to show you. And then of course the pace changes and you slow down, you deal with character things, but by and large, like, that's what this show is about. It's about that struggle and that relationship, the relationship between Joe and her Lioness. And so it feels like proof positive that our thing is kind of working. I don't know, when I watch that, it feels like, okay, great, that was the right way to start.
And I feel like nowadays, just with streaming and how many TV shows and movies and stuff that we have now, I feel like it's almost more important than, it might have ever been before, as far as you want to make sure you capture your audience right away with those, in the initial opening of an episode or of a movie, just because there's so many different things that they can be watching, that especially if it's a new series that they're not familiar with, you want to be like, hey, this is exactly what you're in for, and this is why you should stick around.
Yeah, I mean, for good or bad, I mean, there's not really a lot of time to let people ramp up into your show anymore, is there? You've got to grab people right away.
Yep.
And it used to be that you could start to be like a slower burn with a show or with a movie or whatever. But I think what's evolved into the current state of storytelling in film and television is that you've got to punch them in the face right out of the gate, and grab them by the shirt collar and say, hang on, watch this. So
Yep.
we could have long philosophical discussions about what that means, about our attention span, and about the evolution of storytelling. But it is what it is. And so we fit into that. We are making television for a modern audience. And so we have to have those things in mind, and making sure that if we want people to pay attention to our story, we give them a good reason to. And then, it's not all just crashes and booms and gunfire. Then you have to have like characters that people are interested in, and performances and all of that. And so we have that in spades. And so I think that if you get through the action part, and then you see that what we have to offer in addition is all these interesting performances and relationships. And the relationships, like I said, that's what people connect to, because those are things that they can relate to based on their own experience as a husband, wife, father, son, all that stuff. So yeah, but it all starts with the big boom.
Yep. Oh yeah, for sure. And Chad, so I think for me watching the series, one of my favorite episodes was probably episode 5. So we see the aftermath of what happened to Cruz, where she got attacked. Joe's daughter's in the hospital, dealing with the aftermath of like the accident and everything. So dealing with some pretty heavy stuff. And then it kind of halfway-ish, like through the episode, then it kind of gets a little bit more like action heavy, where we have the capture mission that like takes place. How did you want to, approach that episode as far as editing that one specifically?
Just like all the others, all those things are important, but the structure of it is all written in. So you're still just trying to like bring people along for the ride. That raid at the end was actually really interesting and somewhat complicated to put together, because you have a lot of different pieces. It's actually a rather tiny house, so we have to make it seem like it's a little bit bigger in scope, just to
It looked pretty big.
Yeah, it looks and feels pretty big, right? It was actually a small house. But we had them approaching from, we had snipers on the roof. We made a big stage out of it, out of the surrounding neighborhood and all of that. So um there wasn't anything different. I think episode 5 is a really good example, though, of how you can connect emotionally to this show through a lot of different ways. You have the daughter who's been in this accident, so anyone who's a parent would immediately have very strong feelings about that. Or anyone who just thinks that children shouldn't get hurt, which is any sort of normal person. And so you're experiencing that and thinking about what it would be to have a job that took you away from something so monumental in your life, that is, like child being hurt in an accident. And she has, what does she get, like 2 hours? Or she asked Nicole Kidman's character, can I have 2 hours or something before I go? And so you're seeing the sacrifice, the people that do this for a living, what they routinely make. So I'm really proud of episode 5. It might be my favorite of the series, just because it brings that conflict to light, that internal conflict for Joe, just like, this is my job, but this is my family. And how do I do both? Or can I do both? Do I have to pick one over the other? And then how do you make that choice? It's really fascinating to do. And again, where these characters are fictional, but they are based on, people who do these jobs for a living, for real, people who none of us will ever know their names, and who are making those kind of decisions every day. So I felt, just as a parent, very connected to that particular episode. And just interested. It was one of those episodes that, again, just highlights how unique this show is, in my opinion, where you have this woman who's a mother of 2 trying to also save the world at the same time, but not in some superhero way, just a very practical, like, this is what we have to do kind of way. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, yeah. I mean, that episode for me, and I'm not a parent or anything like myself, but that episode had me tearing up in several scenes. I mean, great, great editing, great, performances by all the, the actresses and actors in the show. I think that's the moment, that episode, watching it, I was sitting there and just going, I realized how connected and invested I was in the series at that point, when it's like, when you feel yourself tearing up and just feeling
Yeah.
so bad for these characters. It was amazing.
Right. I mean, that's the idea. It's about halfway through, and then again, like we talked about, then the Cruz and Aaliyah at the end, and there's something happening there. So there's always just something on the horizon, and these characters are constantly going through something, through and having to make choices and decisions, and the way that all of us do. So I'm glad you felt connected to it, because I feel that same way about episode 5, and I think it really tees up the back half of the series and tells you what the conflicts are going to be through the end, and then
Exactly.
going to season 2, which we are looking forward to making.
Excellent. Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was going to be, if it was kind of like a limited series thing, or if there were going to be multiple seasons. So there are going to be multiple seasons. I'm excited to see what's next.
That's the plan. I mean, the whole world is kind of stopped right now, so nothing
Yeah.
nothing like that will be announced. But I that's the hope, and I think I'm in. If Taylor's in, I'm in. But it's a really difficult time right now for the industry. So
Yeah.
whereas we would all be excited and maybe announcing things about season 2s and 3s of shows, it's a bit tough for everyone right now. So
Oh
I
yeah.
was very happy that we got to make Lioness. We finished shooting it before the strikes, and so we got to finish it off. But we just kind of got it in under the wire.
Yeah. A little bit of a bittersweet time for
Very
sure.
much so. Yeah, very much so.
Well, hey Chad, before we kind of wrap things up, I just wanted to ask you, was there anything else that you wanted to share about just working on this show overall, on Special Ops Lioness, working with Taylor, anything that you else you wanted to say?
I mean, there's a million things I could say, but anything specific, I don't know. I mean, what's fun about working for Taylor is, like I said before, we're always doing something different, but we're exploring a lot of the same thematic ideas. And so it's been exciting to be on that ride with him, as you might say, of the different these different shows, these different genres. We always have something interesting happening, and I am a fan as first. When I read these scripts, I'm just a fan and engaged and interested in what's happening. So, yeah, I feel very fortunate to be in this job and get to see all this stuff and make these shows. So I do not take it for granted, but it's pretty fun.
Oh yeah, no, and hey man, I just want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule. I myself, I'm a big behind the scenes nerd when it comes to shows and movies and stuff like that. So getting to hear kind of the behind the scenes work, I really enjoyed getting to kind
Good.
of pick your brain
It's
for a few
important. There's
minutes.
There's hundreds of people behind the scenes, and most of them never get a lot of attention, but they are all absolutely vital. Everyone, the crew on Lioness is probably 200-300 people, cast and crew, and so it could not be done without every single one of them. So anyway, it's good to talk to you and to shed some light on some of those other jobs that not everyone knows about.
Thank you so much, Chad.
All right, man. You too. Take care.